Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of Bowtie Security Guy After Dark. I remembered the actual name of my podcast this time, so I feel pretty good about that. Um, and I wanted to also state that the opinions are of the host and the guest, not of our employers, not of our clients, just to get that out of the way early. With me today is Sharon Martin. Sharon runs her own MSP. She's been in technology for many, many years. And I just wanted to have her on to kind of share her experience, especially from a female in technology side, but also running an MSP. Sharon, if you can introduce yourself and give us a little quick background on your history in cybersecurity.
Sure. So as you said, I'm Sharon Martin. I'm in the Augusta, Georgia area. So this is actually home of U.S. Army Cybercom and the Masters Tournament, which shapes a lot of my career. I started out in liberal arts, quickly found that there's not a whole lot of money you can make in liberal arts, so I joined the Army. Arabic linguist, shipped to Iraq, all that goodness. But when I got out of the Army active duty, I started looking for a career that was interesting, that I felt was challenging. And that's about the time we heard the U.S. Army Cybercom was coming to Augusta. And at the time, I didn't have any cyber experience. I had built my own computers. I'd always been a technology person, but I didn't have any real experience or real credentials. And so the first thing I did to figure out how do I get there, how do I get into cyber, is I said, well, government has standards for everything. There must be a standard for cybersecurity and cybersecurity careers, right? Enter DoD 8570.01M, I think it is, that lays out different cyber work roles and the recommended certification requirements in order to qualify for a work role. And I said, okay, well, I know that I need these certifications if I'm interested in this work role. And I know that I need some kind of a degree. So I finished off my bachelor's by transferring over some credits. And I started looking for a master's degree. And I needed an online program that still allowed me to work because I worked full time. I came across a university called Western Governors University, and they had a master's program in information assurance and security at the time. Now it's called, I think, a master's in cybersecurity. And so I applied for that program. And I think if most of y'all know, master's program, they usually want you to have majored in the same thing for your bachelor's degree, and I hadn't. And so the advisor was like, hey, we don't think you're going to succeed in this program. We're really not going to admit you right now. And I asked him, well, what do I have to do to qualify? And they said, well, if you had a few computer certifications, so at least you knew you had some technical knowledge. I'm like, okay, what certifications? And they listed off several. I think at the time it was like A plus, Network plus, Security plus. So your standard CompTIA certifications. Well, those just happen to be on the DoD 8570.01 matrix. And so checking the blocks, multiple purposes. And so I went and I found some, study material, self-studied as much as possible, and in 4 months I had tested for and passed all three. So I went back to them and I got in the degree program.
Nice. And
um,
then that turned into other jobs too, right? You were able to get a job at
Correct.
Huntress and other places. Did you
Correct.
did you find that process kind of daunting, or I always talk to mentees, and one of the things I kind of see as a consistent, and maybe you do too, because I know you mentor, is they just kind of expect it. Like they're like, oh, I've got my degree. Now it's time for me to get a job. Please give me a job, please.
Yeah, that is not the way it works at all. I had to start. I was about halfway through my degree when I had gotten my resume updated with some of the certifications, the degree in progress, and I started applying to positions. But even when I applied to positions, the key was I went and looked at the resumes of other people who had the work roles that I wanted to try to understand what is the normal qualifications that person may have. And so I really tailored my resume. And I got a call from a recruiter. And so the way that I got my break in a cyber position is that it was actually a recruiter for Department of the Army. And so I ended up as a Department of the Army civilian. And I would recommend to anyone who is going the cyber route, consider working for any of the government agencies. Yeah, it's not going to pay you as much as maybe working for, a company like Huntress might, but it's great experience. They have great training. They have a mentorship path. When I say government, I say apply to the DHS, apply to CISA,
Yeah.
apply to some of the other agencies and go through their programs. And it's especially effective if you do that while you're still in your degree program, because you can
Yeah.
qualify for internships. And if you can get that internship working for a government agency, that's going to elevate your resume above all the other folks who just graduated with a cyber degree
Yeah.
with no experience. So don't look at, hey, I want to be here right now. You should always be thinking about where do you want to be in 2 years from now and
Yeah.
working to do that.
I think that's really important. And you mentioned that process of like getting ahead of the game and applying kind of early to those internships and the government internships specifically. They're really sought after. They're hard to get into, but the reality is you start sooner than later, you have a better opportunity. And the other cool thing too with the military stuff is if you can get your TS clearance or any clearance level, it enters you into a whole new bracket of jobs that nobody else can even apply for. And jobs legally, they have to interview you if you meet the qualifications, which is even better because it gives you a lot more opportunities than you would have without that clearance. So I think that's a great space. One of the things that I was really impressed by when we first met, you were working at Huntress, you had a good job, and you decided, I'm kind of done doing the corporate stuff. I'm going to just do my own company. Can you tell me a little bit about that transition and kind of what your work-life balance was, not necessarily at Huntress, but in cyber, so those listening can get a better understanding of like the sacrifices you have to make, or maybe in your case, you didn't make any and it was like a 40-hour work week. I say knowing that that's not the case, but let's talk about a little of that work-life balance and then also what kind of pushed you to kind of build your Managednerds.tech company that you have now, and build your own MSP.
So it's funny you say work life balance. I know no such thing. Even working department for the Army, I had to work night shift. I was working extra hours during the week to do what needed to be done. For me, mission is incredibly important. Maybe that comes with my time with the Army, but it's not about the balance is you have to be able to take off that hat when you get home, knowing that you may not get home until you've worked a 60-hour week. You may be dealing with an incident. You may be performing a penetration test, etc. And trying to divide the two is difficult, and don't even get me started how that works running my own business. But let's talk about, I think you asked what kind of drove me to start my own business. I know for a fact that I am a workaholic. I am always going to work more than I perhaps need to. My biggest weakness is trying to focus down on one thing. I tend to do a lot of things at the same time. Well, because I do so many different things, it kind of made sense for me to have my own company because I'm not in a specific role. There were a lot of roles of hat that I wore, but that wasn't the reason I started my company. The reason that I went out on my own is when I worked for Huntress, I was in the product side of the house. So we were designing new features for the Huntress agent, whether that be, the EDR detections, MDR for Microsoft 365. And to design a good product, you have to understand the customer you're building the product for in the software development world. And for Huntress, that was managed services providers. And I didn't even know what an MSP was before I joined Huntress. I had to learn about that persona, what drives them, what do they do? And I found out, well, MSPs are typically the folks who are protecting the small businesses who don't have their own IT teams. Um, and the fact that that MSPs are there. They're kind of the bastion of protection for the smallest businesses really appealed to me, going back to that mission. And then I got angry when our local city of Augusta got hacked in March of 2023. I mean, home of U.S. Army Cybercoms is becoming a cyber nexus, and yet our city government was shut down for weeks because of a ransomware attack. Because city governments have low resources typically, they don't have a lot that they can afford in the budget, yada yada. You get the idea. And then as I learned more about MSPs, I discovered that the average MSP is there's while they serve small businesses, they don't always serve the smallest businesses. So most MSPs focus on businesses that have 10 or more employees. They're looking for a certain minimum spend a month because they have to deal with margins. Basically to make certain profit margins, it's more profitable to work with larger businesses. But when you think about how many businesses are 10 and up versus how many are 10 and below, 95% of small businesses have 10 or less employees. And so I realized that these MSPs, who everybody says, oh, yeah, they're serving the small businesses, but they're not really serving the 95% of the smallest businesses. And so to me, that was a big opening in the market of frankly underserved companies. You talk about people being under the poverty line, they can't afford basic food. Well, and they can't afford a place to live. I'm saying that the smallest businesses are underneath the cybersecurity poverty line. They can't afford the enterprise grade cybersecurity services. They don't even know what kind of cyber protection they need, and they have no one to turn to if they get hacked.
I think that's interesting, and there's been a decent amount of businesses recently that have spun up specifically targeting this market. There's incident response teams that target this market. There's a lot of different things. So I find it awesome that we're seeing more of this. MSPs in general have a really bad rap for toxicity in the workplace. I know you as a female in technology, you probably dealt with a fair amount of toxicity in the workplace. It just kind of comes with your gender, unfortunately. I've seen it so many times. But what are some things that you do differently at your job, at your company to make things better for those who work for you that maybe other MSPs who are listening to this could learn from?
Well, I mean, one, I'm hiring people based off of skill, not based off of, and sometimes not even based off of their background. So I do look at folks with a more non-traditional background because they're the folks that are interesting. The people who were, used car salesmen or collectors before they went into cyber have a very interesting and unique skill set. But you talk about specifically toxicity versus gender, et cetera. In my case, it's not really an issue. I lead the company. If somebody's come to work for me, then they don't really have an issue working for a woman. But where I've seen some toxicity is actually in the wider business world, if I have to be honest with you. Um, a lot of the chambers of commerces are like the good old boys club. And some of the MSPs are like that too, where they clearly don't have women in roles of authority. I'm sure they would tell you it's because they're hiring the most qualified people, and maybe they are, but when you look at a picture of the MSP and it's just a bunch of white dudes standing around, you're like, where is the variety and thought? Because when you put together people of wide different backgrounds, they're going to have so many unique experiences. It makes it more likely that you can isolate and understand a problem from all angles, not just one frame of mind and frame of thinking. And it can be intimidating when you're the only a female employee who's working on an engineering team or who's working as an operator on keyboard for cyber operations. Um, and everybody else around you is male. And after a while, it, it becomes what's the word? Sometimes you feel like you have to prove yourself a little bit more.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll run into situations where folks will, essentially, let's call it mansplaining because it is. They assume you know less. And so my reaction to it may or may not be the best reaction, but I mansplained right back. So I became the most technical person in the room, to the point that unfortunately I think I intimidated some folks because of the fact that I would put on the technical hat, and that was my defense mechanism. I don't think that's the best way to do it. I think, to be quite honest, the best way to deal with that situation is that everybody needs to feel comfortable and that they have a unique area they can contribute to. Everyone needs to feel like even leadership understands that they have a specific place on the team where they belong. If you don't have that, if folks don't have a certain niche that they know they can kind of cover down in, then you run into the situations where, and it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're black, white, blue, purple, pink. If the work environment is competitive such that everybody has to take credit or something or not be able to advance, then you're going to have the infighting where people are trying to take
Yeah.
credit for the work that other people are doing. And again, that doesn't matter. And certain personalities may be better at that political game than others. But when I saw a political game, I typically walked away from it.
I think that's the best approach. I've tried to avoid the politics too. I think coming from my background of having like no real education, no degree, I always felt like an underdog. By no means am I comparing myself to a female in technology, but I can understand that mindset of constantly having to prove yourself. And I think that's a lot of what leads to people like us and others taking on more than they need to. Taking on multiple jobs, taking on multiple responsibilities, is we're trying to prove that we're the smartest person in the room. And I will say that it's not even that. We're trying to prove to ourselves that we're not imposters, that we belong,
Correct.
right? And I think imposter syndrome is something I suffered from for an obscene amount of time. I always talk to my mentees who are in their 20s and 30s. I was like, if I can tell you anything, it's that do not consider to think do not think yourself as an imposter early on in your career. The reality is you're there because you did well in the interview and you knew enough. The best person for the role, they left that job. They were the best. They knew what would happen. They've been there for years. They knew what to do. You're never going to go into a job and know what to do. You're just not. That's not how any job works. No matter if it's pen testing or whatever, there's different nuances to all business. And when you're going into that interview, remember that's your best audience possible because they want you to knock their socks off. They want you to blow their minds. There's no reason to be
Correct.
nervous. They are excited for you to come in and absolutely crush it. And when you don't, they're just horribly disappointed and sad about it. I know when I have so much hopes for someone who gets on a call, and then I'm like, oh God, they're just bombing. And it's heart-wrenching for us as hiring managers who actually care about their employees. But one thing you mentioned that I thought was really interesting is creating a competitive environment where the only way you get promoted or the only way you move up is by basically killing yourself. I mean, because that's what a lot of these MSPs do. That's what a lot of the companies do is
Yes.
they're like, hey, how many hours have you put in this year? It's like, oh, I'm at 1,700 hours, boss. Congratulations. You get 3.5% and your other person gets 3%. That's the difference sometimes from an overachiever and somebody who's just doing their job. So with that said, I mean, what advice do you have for females in technology who are just getting in? Maybe some things to look out for, or even during the interview process, what you as a female would look for specifically. Do you ask hard questions during the interview, or is it more of just a casual conversation, get a vibe for people?
So usually it depends on which interview it is. I say which because there are usually multiple interviews. Your first interview is likely going to be with the hiring manager. That's the person who you're asking about things in the role that are unclear to you. Standard work hours, are there performance metrics? If so, what are those performance metrics? You want to clarify the role definitions. Usually your next folks you're talking to are to figure out your organizational fit. Those are the people that you want to have more of a casual conversation with to figure out what is their day to day. And to be frank, are you going to be going into a toxic work environment? And some of the clues that you might be moving into a toxic work environment actually come before the interviews. It comes by looking at the job postings, specifically how many open positions are there relative to the size of the company, and how many open positions are in the area you're going in. For instance, if I'm looking at a job in product with software development, and they're currently hiring 3 product managers and it's a fairly small company, that is a red flag. Another red flag, let's put the cyber hat on it, right? How many other folks do they have working in one of these cyber roles? If it's an MSP, how many other folks do they have working in these roles? Are you able to find their average tenure? Do your LinkedIn research on the company. How long have those people been there? That kind of lets you ask some targeted questions. And if you want to get really stalkery, go find out who recently left the company and ask them
Yeah,
about the
I think
company.
and that's a great idea. That's what I did when I was unemployed. I also looked at Reddit. I read Glassdoor reviews. Sure, a lot of that is going to be what people post. They're not going to go out of their way to post positive stuff. But if there's a lot
Correct.
of negative stuff, it's a pretty good indicator it's not going to be the best environment to walk
Oh,
into.
well, it depends on the size of the company too. Again,
True,
think
true.
relative. You have to understand a lot of tech companies, you may see a 10% turnover a year. It's considered to be like standard. And if you assume that most of those folks were let go because they weren't a fit, they didn't feel performant, if they're let go, you're probably going to have a lot of disgruntled people posting.
Yeah,
But if they all post and if they have exactly the same theme,
yeah,
that is a red
yeah.
flag.
It's like company is great, people are great, management is terrible, right? And there's like tons of these reviews that really start to resonate. And I've asked questions during interview, hey, looking at your Glassdoor and multiple reviews, it says leadership is a huge problem. What have you done to address those concerns? And I've had some good answers and I've had some, oh, we don't have any issues. Those people were just, and it's like, oh, okay, you got real defensive real fast. That's also a good kind of indicator. Some of the questions too is like, I try to tell my female mentees, like, your voice is something you definitely want to make sure is heard. Ask those questions early on. How do you make sure that everyone is heard? How do you make sure that all ideas are listened to? And see how the leader answers those basic questions that they should have a clear response to. One of the things that I do as a leader is I never throw out complete ideas. I only throw out partial ideas. That way, people feel like they can add to it. There's no intimidation because you're not challenging me. I haven't given you a complete thought. I've given you a partial thought. Here's my thought. What do we all think is the right thing? And I've realized in my career that that's given me more success bringing those quiet people out of the woodwork that normally wouldn't have a voice and have them throw in opinions. Because most people don't want to challenge a complete idea, but they will challenge and add to a partial idea. Hey, that sounds good, but why don't we do it this way? And in your experience, have you done anything kind of different to, kind of differentiate yourself from other candidates? Like, what are obviously you have the degrees, you have a military background, all that stuff is completely awesome. Do you feel like that's giving you the advantage you need to get these interviews? Or it really have you focused on different areas like networking and things like that to help grow your career?
So networking is helped. Some of it has been the overall format of my resume too, though. And what do I mean by that? Well, I'm not afraid to be a little bit different. And I'm also considering the absolute fact that your resume is reviewed for maybe 30 seconds initially. If they don't see what they're looking for on your resume in the first 30 seconds, they're probably going to move on to the next candidate. That initial reviewer has a lot of resumes to look at. So, building that value proposition for why you're the right person up front on your resume, but also even up front on your LinkedIn profile. Who are you? What are you looking for? I argue a lot of folks say, oh, don't put up an open to work banner because that indicates you're desperate and la 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 la. I call that BS. If you're looking for work, um, have your open to work banner, but your LinkedIn summary, make sure you enumerate what positions you're open to and what
Yeah.
you're looking for and what your value proposition is for that position. So that when a recruiter reviews your LinkedIn profile and they see you're open to work and they can look right out there and say, oh, well, they want a position as a SOC analyst. They're willing to work remote or willing to work, out of the state of Florida, la da 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 da.
Yeah, I think that's key. The one thing you mentioned is being willing to kind of be different. I got a lot of slack originally that said like, "Hey, this bow tie security guy thing, like, are people going to even take you serious? Like, you're going for these director jobs and these fancy type roles, and are anyone going to take you serious?" And to my response to that was, the right companies will, and I'm going to
Correct.
instantly weed out the wrong ones. So if you don't like my vanilla ice quotes and the fact that I completed Zelda in 250 hours as accomplishments while I was unemployed, I'm probably not going to be the right employee for you. So I think standing out, especially in a sea of just that basic AI written garbage, like I'm an aspiring cybersecurity professional, that like it's great. Let's talk about the real meat to that. What do you like to do? Hey, I love hacking. This is my huge passion. Here's what I do in my free time. I'm an avid boater. I do that. They want to learn a little bit about you just so they can actually have a basic understanding of who you are as a human without having to pick up the phone, right? Make it easy for your recruiters to know who you are. One of the advice I gave to you, and I've given to other people I've worked with and mentored, is like record an intro video, like show your soft skills right away. Because recruiters are looking for somebody who's going to be an easy sell to their customer. They don't want to work for it. And not like I'm not saying they're lazy. I'm just saying that they specifically have hundreds and hundreds of people reaching out to them every single day. And you want to make their job as easy as humanly possible. They want to know if they put you in front of somebody in that interview, you're going to crush it. That way they look
And
good and this represents them, right?
and that's a really good point covering down on the recruiter thing. the best results I've gotten when working with recruiters is, they see my resume, they think I might plug into a position, and they say, "Hey, we'd like to talk about X." I'll ask them for a description of that position and customize my resume for them to showcase my skills to best meet the position. And so that reduces their overhead load because they know that I'm coming in with the best value proposition for the position they're putting me up for. And it kind of builds that relationship because they know, hey, the next time a job comes open, even if the client doesn't bite for me on this position, next job that comes open, I can just pass it their way and they'll do another customize for me and we'll be able to get this off because recruiters are also working under time constraints. Sometimes that position needs a fill next week. And
Right.
so if you're ready to go and you're ready to do that quick customization and you're able to quickly answer them, that's really important. And speaking of quick answering, um, on LinkedIn, there are certain settings that you can have in place that are great when you're a company owner like me, which I don't allow, LinkedIn messages from people I don't know. I've even got it blocked, so the in-mail is mostly blocked. As a job seeker, you want to make it as easy as possible for people to
Yeah.
message you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, definitely don't use weird fonts like I have in my name to break bots, right? And look at the different ways that you can be approached. I always tell people too, the LinkedIn algorithm favors you if you post often and regularly. Don't just repost content. Make sure you're adding comments to that content. Make sure that you're posting original content and at least daily. You can schedule it too. It doesn't take that long. When I was unemployed, I would schedule it all at the start of the week, and then all my posts would just go out every single day. So it would take me a couple hours, but I was unemployed and not doing anything else. Why the heck not? Another piece of advice too that you kind of talked about is tailoring your resume, and I think that's a part that a lot of people miss is they don't take the time to tailor their resume to the job. A lot of it is fatigue, right? I mean, they've already applied for hundreds and hundreds of jobs, and I get that. I feel that in my heart. I feel that in my soul. And working with hundreds of people, I know that pain kind of firsthand and experiencing it firsthand, the tears and just the sadness that goes with constant rejection. But you've got to treat every opportunity as if a new opportunity. You've got to kind of pick yourself up for that 10 minutes, write it out, and then go back to crying, right? So I mean, it's one of those things. Um, I don't really have much else for you. I truly appreciate your time. I've enjoyed working with you over the last several months, talking with you as you've kind of taken these steps in your career, um, taking these huge leaps, which I think is a huge part of cybersecurity. Taking leaps and taking risk is part of the job.
Correct.
Yeah, if you're not willing to put yourself out there, if you're not willing to, if you have a very set, stringent thing where I will only work remote jobs, I will only work here, you're never going to find work. Like you have to be flexible, you have to be malleable. When you've gotten to 20 years in your career, you can be a little more stringent. You can say, I will only accept this because I am awesome, and here is proof of said awesomeness. But until then, you are unproven. And unproven people don't get the perks that people worked their entire careers for. That's just not a reality. So I'd love to plug your stuff, which is Managednerds.tech. You help small businesses that may not think they even can afford your help. Is it just in your area or is it all over?
I do take on remote clients regularly, so it's not just in my area. When I'm working with a remote company, I especially enjoy working with people who are solopreneurs. Maybe they're
Yeah,
newer startups and they're trying to get their business off the ground, like independent insurance agencies or travel agencies,
yeah.
et cetera. So,
Areas
yeah,
with a
I
ton
could
of
definitely help
PII
you out.
data that the attackers are looking for, right? And
Correct.
the ones that know they don't have a program. A lot of your attacks recently are targeting specific marginalized smaller companies, right? They're doing it
Yes.
because they know that their defenses are not up. And I love that you're specifically looking to help those people. You're bringing in options, you're having those conversations. Um, I highly recommend anyone listening to this to check out Managednerds.tech, check out their LinkedIn. They share a lot of great information, a lot of different details, and just things that you may need to know as a small business owner. And thank you so much, Sharon, for coming and hanging out. I truly appreciate your time and your insights.
Hey, thank you. It's always great to talk to you.
Indeed, yeah, everyone else, good luck out there.